Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Barnsley Primary Care Co-Commissioning Committee, which we are holding in public today. We've got the apologies from Julia Burrows, but we've got our Head of Public Health, Alicia Marcroft. Welcome, Alicia. And Nick Germain from NHS England. Welcome, everybody. So let's kick off. Are we quorate?
We are, Chair.
Thank you. Any declarations of interest, please, in relation to this agenda? Yes, Madhuri.
I've got a declaration with regards item number 7, finance update. There's a little bit about GP retention scheme. So the person in question is proposed to come to the Grove subject to approval. So I've got a declaration there. Okay,
Madhuri, I'm happy for you to stay in the meeting, obviously. Just in case any of the members of the committee need any further update from you. So I'm quite content on that one. Okay, so on to item 4, which is the minutes of the meeting which we held on the 26th of November. As I've said to most of the committee, I'm struggling a little bit because normally I work off 2 computers, but I'm only working off 1 at this moment in time. So I haven't got full access to all of the papers, but the relevant bits and pieces I did manage to print off. So in relation to the minutes, what I'm looking for is accuracy. Is this a true record of what happened on the day? More than happy to accept any minor amendments. And then I will ask, please, 1 or 2 of the committee to actually approve these so we can get them adopted. So first and foremost, do we believe that these are an accurate record? Good. Okay, got some nods there. Any minor amendments? Roxana, you're happy? Yes?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. So come on, somebody stick up some hands and say, yes, we can adopt these papers. Thank you. Okay, agenda item 5 then, matters arising. For the members of the public who may be watching in at a later date, I have quite a, I wouldn't say a hang up, but always a desire to get the matters arising completed, and I love a completely blank, which means that people have gone on and done what we said we were going to do. So first and foremost, 2011-08 contractual issues report. This is going to be brought to our March meeting. Is that correct? Yeah, happy with that. Terms of reference is complete. 2009-10 risk and assurance report. Julie, have you anything to add to that at this moment in time?
There is a paper on this particular risk that's included on the agenda.
Okay, and we really have got to get behind that one for sure. So if everybody's content, that's matters arising we've completed. Okay, on to agenda item 6 then, which has to come to this committee. So Julie, if you take us through that, we have got to approve this paper, haven't we?
Yes, so this paper is for approval. So you'll recall I believe it was at the last meeting that we had Jude Wildgoose from the ICS group, Estates group, talked to the committee around the bigger capital plans for South Yorkshire and Bassetlaw, and she went through the schemes that are on there and also highlighted the work that was going on. So this paper has come for PCC to approve that bid. I will assume, as read the paper, it is there is some detail in there, but it does sort of reflect on what has been said before. And really, even though Barnsley doesn't at this moment in time have any schemes included on it, there is a possibility that we will be able to get some schemes worked through and added to this going forward. So I would like the committee to approve the paper.
Okay, just for the members of the public, bear in mind we're recording this, Julie, and we don't need to get into the whole detail of this, but the headline really was that a capital bid resulted in £57.5 million being awarded to South Yorkshire and Bassetlaw to support the transformation of estates within primary care. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay, I'm taking the fact that I'm sure you've all read through these papers. Chris, would you like to come in on that?
Yeah, just got a quick update. So thanks, Julie, for summarising. So I sit on the ICS Estates Board, and we met this week and we looked at this, and we're seeing that the existing schemes currently badged against the 57.5 million are currently going through an assessment to see whether they can be delivered or not. That's likely to happen late April, early May time, and at that time we'll find out if there's any slippage on the scheme, which is highly likely. So any Barnsley schemes we need to have worked up and been through this committee before that time, so we can be sure that we're in a good position to participate in the scheme.
That's good information, Chris. Thank you for that. Roxana, you're obviously in the loop on that one. I know we have discussed it previously.
Yeah, so we're just waiting to see what the plans look like. I've not seen the plan yet, but there is one being pulled together, and we are looking at getting some additional extra capacity within the CCG to support us writing the business case for that. So yeah, I'll be kept informed and make sure kind of any financial implications are covered off.
Totally good. Nigel, do you want to come in?
Well, yes. The document itself says it's for information. So I've read it as for information. What are we approving? Because this is an update. So it's telling us what's happening. So I'm not sure how I can approve what's happening. What's happening is what's happening, unless somebody can explain to me otherwise.
Okay, so I'm one of our colleagues in the CCG, Jeremy Budd, has been working quite closely on this paper, and this paper was forwarded for the Primary Care Committee, and Jeremy had indicated to me that this was a paper that needed approval. So and I think it is partly around some of the governance and requirements for the ICS that each of the CCGs need to approve that, unless Chris that is the wrong information. I'm pretty sure
it's part of the process. So it's the language. So in terms of it's the way the ICS governance works. But obviously the ICS governance is it's not in terms of a legal requirement, but it's just. The ask was for each CCG primary care committee to just go through that process, but I recognise what you're saying, Nigel. It's to note and approve is probably the word I would use, but I see what you mean in this context. It is slightly unusual.
Yeah, okay, that's fine.
Nigel, thanks for flagging that up, because as I was going through these papers early in the week, I also queried that situation with Julie. So thank you again, Chris, for just making and clarifying that. So are we happy to approve this paper? Okay, thank you.
It's Nick Germain for NHS England. Just chip in that it came to private committee in November for each of the CCGs, including Barnsley, and they were approved at private committee. So I think they've gone to the sort of national body and Treasury now, the bid as a whole. But I don't know if it had to come to public committee as well with this paper.
Okay, Nick, thank you again for that. Can I now at this point welcome Mark Smith, who's actually with us now. Hello, Mark. Thank you for coming along.
Sorry, my connection's not very good. It was a bit of a struggle. That's why my camera's not on.
Okay, now if you remember at the last meeting, I think I missed you out completely because I couldn't see you. So I thought, well, I ain't going to do it again. Right, on to agenda item 7 then, please. Our finance update. It's one of those. We have an underspend of £200,000, and in previous years, I know I've sat at this particular committee. There's always a question, particularly from the members of the public, as why have you overspent or why have you underspent? You know, if in fact you've got this money, you should be spending it. So, if you'd like to pick up this for us, Roxanne, and take us through it.
I think Ruth will be covering it.
Yeah.
Chris.
Thanks, Chris. So I assume the report's been read. The report highlights 3 key areas: the forecast position for 2021, the GP forward view funding for 2021, and the additional supporting general practice funding that the CCG has received. So you'll be able to see from the report that the month 8 position, we've got a £62,000 underspend. The appendix highlights the movements to the budget from the forecast, and the narrative highlights the areas that this covers. The second point in the report is the GP forward view funding that we've received. So in 2021, we've received 361,000, which is currently being worked through with the primary care team around spending plans for this funding. And the last point in the report is the supporting general practice funding that the CCG has received. This is in line with the COVID expansion funding. The CCG received 716,000 funding. 591,000 of this funding has been distributed to GP practices to support them during this time, and the additional 125,000 of funding has been retained at the CCG to support the COVID oximetry and the long COVID. In addition to the 716, we also received 10,000 for home oximetry service and 2,000 for enhanced health in care home MDT funding. Thank you.
Ruth, apologies. I didn't pick you up on my screen that you're with us, but I thought, well, if it's going to be Ruth, it'll be a definite bash through that one. I'm going to ask you a question that you may or may not be able to answer, but on the £44,000 that we've got set aside for reception and clerical training, would first port of call fall into that? First port of call?
First port of call, Chris, it's Julie. First port of call was an individual contract that was not in, it was in previous years, so that didn't come through and was done in that way again. So Barnsley Healthcare Federation still support practices with that, even though it's not a formal contract. Yeah,
you've just reminded me, of course. Right, Mike, you want to come in?
It's just a question, have the COVID oximetry and long COVID clinics been sorted out? Because obviously there's a limited time in which you can spend that.
Yes, so they are in place and in progress and are seeing people as we speak.
Roxanne, is your hand up or was that previous?
No, I just wanted to add, just in terms of the 5-year forward view funding, there is a meeting with primary care colleagues tomorrow to talk about primary care investment and the model for primary care moving forward. So that will make sure that in the future we shouldn't be in a position whereby we've got any overspend or underspend, that actually we're committing all the resource that needs to be committed in primary care.
Madhuri, did you want to come in?
No, I just wanted to answer Mike's question, saying that, long COVID clinics have been established now, Mike. They've been up and running since Monday with good feedback so far, and COVID oximetry, both in community as well as the virtual ward rounds, that's underway as well, and that should be up and running soon.
Great, thank you.
Okay, any more questions on this paper from anyone? All content? Okay, thank you. Right, on to item 8 then, a CQC update. Julie.
Thank you. So as you'll recall, we were talking at the last meeting that the CQC such as stepped down slightly from what was happening pre-COVID, and these are sort of more supportive telephone conversations arranged with practices to actually sort of make sure that practices are okay through the COVID pandemic as such. We have been in discussions with our CQC inspector, who's fed back quite positively about our practices, and just to note that they have been continuing some of those supportive telephone calls with those practices that are listed, and the CQC are quite happy with how things are in terms of quality in primary care.
Is that across all our practices, Julie?
It's across all of our practices, in that there have been no issues raised to the CQC that they've needed to respond to. However, they are still carrying on their schedule of routine contacts, which is what this is about as well.
Okay, but for the assurance and reassurance of the people of Barnsley, it's good that we can report that in fact all our 33 practices are rated good, which is great, and there are one or two that are outstanding. Madhvi?
Just a small correction more than anything else. I think under the CQC, Julie, there's a mention about the telephone call being made to Apollo and the Grove. It was actually for Apollo only, predominantly because they were due for coming back in for proper inspection to rate Apollo, and unfortunately that couldn't happen because of COVID. So it was just the Apollo, really. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Madhvi, for that clarification. Much appreciated. Okay. Any questions on this paper for Julie? No. All content. Jolly good. Okay. Right. On to item 9 then. Contractual issues report, and we have got a few approvals we need to talk about. So Julie, over to you again.
Yeah, so the first item on the contractual issues is about the addition of 2 GP partners at Huddersfield Road. This is a GMS contract, so this has come to committee for information only, and all the due diligence checks have been done in line with the with NHS England and the policy guidance manual. Just to note, item 2 is the rent reimbursements. So we have 3 practices that have gone through their 3-yearly rent review process, and that continues to be funded through the programme budgets. We have got something that is new to me and to the team, and we are grateful for the support from NHS England and also from the experts at PCC to help us through a sale and return for GP premises. So we've had an application for a sale and lease back of property for the Huddersfield Road surgery. We have gone through the documentation that's come through from the practices solicitors, and we've worked with NHS England and also PCC to make sure that these are in line with the regulations, but also make sure that the CCG is in a position to be able to still sort of look at the estate in a way that we might need to review properties and estate and stuff like this. So we've been on a bit of a learning curve, so some of this information I do have in quite a lot of detail, but I just try to summarise it, because otherwise this paper would have been about 4 pages long. So I'm completely confident we followed the guidance and are within the rules, and that I would recommend that we do support the sale and lease back for that practice.
Julie, can I stop you there?
You can.
Nick, have you been involved in this in any way, shape or form?
I haven't personally, but I checked with Paul Barringer, and he'd said the district valuer had reviewed the information on the lease and he was happy. So it's in terms of, is it Paul that you'd link with, Julie?
Yes.
When you say NHS England, yeah. So Paul's, I checked this with Paul and he's all assured that it's followed the right processes.
Okay. Roxanne, are you there?
Yes, and yes.
Roxanne,
It's all,
are
yeah,
you happy that you've been through all the finance bit? I mean, it looks as if it's just a same, as it were.
Yes, so all we've done is just said that actually it's got to be contained, so the rent will be no more than what is currently reimbursed. And we've just included that stipulation. I've not actually seen the agreement.
Okay. Do we need to see the agreement?
I don't personally need to see the agreement as long as there's something in there around the rent reimbursable.
Yeah, that we made sure that was in there and that it's included, and we have stated in the paper that the rent payable will be no more than the amount that is reimbursed to the practice. That was something that was clearly advised to us through Paul, as well as through the gentleman at PCC who we went to for expert support.
Okay, carry on then.
Okay, thank you. So, Madhuri, this is the item that you raised earlier. So, committee, you may recall, probably way before the pandemic, we had a discussion about the GP retainer, and we do have agreed funding for one post on the GP retainer scheme. The previous person that made an application for that post has subsequently withdrawn, so we don't have anyone currently aligned in that with that scheme. So we received this application, and we've looked at this, and again, this has been looked at through NHS England and has been sort of approved from that route, and all of the sort of professional elements have been assessed and approved. So this GP will work under, I don't know whether supervision is the right word, Madhuri, you'll probably be able to tell me if that's right or wrong, but under supervision of a GP practice, and they will be supported with working back into sort of primary care. So there are some finance details in there. This is determined through the scheme, not through the CCG, and this is what PCC agreed a little while ago around the funding pot. So we do know that has been signed off, and Roxana, I think you'll recall that we went through that process and had some detailed discussions. So I think we've covered that element. So this is for approval. And I think it's a good way to get some experience GPs back into practice that is going to be well supported. So they are the items on the commissioning report. Chris, do you want to go through the approvals and the? Can
I just hold you 1 second? Madhuri, you're happy to give us a little bit of reassurance on that?
Yeah, well, just to add, it's not support really. So this is somebody who is very experienced GP who had a little bit of a career break for personal reasons or health reasons or whatever, but obviously wanting to come back into practice. So giving them that little bit of support network in the practice and just giving the flexibility really. Yeah, and it's a good way of bringing that experience back into practice and into Barnsley, obviously.
Indeed. Yeah. Okay, I think we've missed one off. We've got 2 additional GPs at Huddersfield Road Surgery. Yeah. 2 new partners.
I think Julie covered that one first off.
Was that item 1?
Yeah,
I think I covered that first.
I think you described that one, yeah, at the beginning.
Right, okay.
Because it was for information.
Yes, it's a GMS contract, Chair, so this is just information for the committee.
Okay, so just take us through them again as for approval, Julie, and we'll move on then.
Okay, so the item 1 was the new partners, which is just to note, and the committee just needs to note the rent reimbursements for the 3 practices. The committee we're looking for approval from the committee for the sale and leaseback application for Huddersfield Road, and also to note the application because PCC has previously approved funding.
Okay. Are we happy to vote the members? Are we happy to approve those recommendations? Jolly good. Thank you for that. So on to item 10, Richard. Now there is an additional paper which is quite close to Julie's heart, I'm pleased to say. So are you're going, Richard, if you could start us off and take us through what we need to know, and then Julie, if you remember, I did pre-meet send a note out on the basis that our risk register, certain items were looking a bit long in the tooth, and it's an important part of what we do in our governance. It's so easy to put things onto the risk register, but getting them off sometimes is not so easy. So if they're there, they need to be scored correctly. And Julia has been quite passionate about the risk in relation to workforce. So Richard, if you kick us off and then hand over maybe back to Julie to take us through the paper.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll do the other governance bits if you like, and then I can tee Julie up and she can take us through the workforce one. As far as my paper is concerned, there's three elements to it. The usual the assurance framework is there for committees assurance, the risk register for assurance and for any comments, and also a proposed minor change to the terms of reference of the committee. So taking those three in turn, as far as the assurance framework is concerned, there is the one sort of priority area on the assurance framework relating to primary care that's continued to be reviewed and updated through the usual process. There's nothing sort of new really to bring to committee's attention on that. It's still very much scored and set up as it was the last time you saw it. So that's there really for your assurance, as I say. As far as the risk register is concerned, yeah, what you've got here is an extract of the one red and the one amber risk that currently falls to this committee to look after. The red risk is the one that you just alluded to, Chris, which is one that's been on our risk register for many years now. Its designation, if you like, in the register is risk 14/10, and the 14 means that it was put on the risk register in 2014. So it's effectively 6.5 years old. And by way, I suppose, of preamble to what Julie's going to come on and talk about in the next agenda item, when it was originally put on, this is just a bit of a history lesson or a refresher or whatever. The thought behind it going on was that Barnsley was under-doctored, that we had fewer GPs per head of population in Barnsley than other neighbouring CCGs did. That was what sort of persuaded the CCG. There was no primary care commissioning committee at the time, but the CCG put it on for that reason. We felt we didn't have enough doctors, and that was potentially inhibiting us from doing what we wanted to do through the sort of vehicle of primary care. That when it initially went on as an amber risk, and a sort of 9, it was seen as important but not the absolute top risk that we faced. And then in February 2016, 2 practices in very close succession sort of basically handed back their contracts, and it seemed to be around that time that the CCG then decided that our primary care resources were stretched very thin, struggling to think through how we might respond to that particular crisis, as it were. And so it was cranked up to a 16 of a 4x4 red risk at that time. That was back in February 2016, and it has stayed as a red risk ever since, notwithstanding the fact that over that intervening period, as Julie will explain a lot better than me when she comes onto her paper, maybe the way that we think about resourcing in primary care has changed. So the debate has moved beyond simply do we have enough GPs or not, to do we have the right mix of skills and so on, which will allow us to achieve our sort of strategic objectives in relation to primary care. And there's been a number of things that we've done in that intervening period to make sure that we do have sufficient resources. PDA, investment in clinical pharmacists, and a number of other things which have all helped. And now what we've got more recently, and what Julie's going to talk about, is the sort of additional roles funding and the creation of the PTNs and that side of things. So the question I suppose that we pose into the committee today is, in the light of all that, do we still think that that risk, which has been sitting as a red risk on our risk register for now 5 years or more, remains a red risk or not? So that's as I say, the preamble to the next conversation, but I'll stop talking about that at this point because you know, Julie will fill in the blanks that I've not been able to on that one. As far as the other risks on the risk register are concerned, we have one amber risk there, which is in your packs, and it's risk 1503, and that's the one about you know, the risk that the CCG might not be able to discharge its delegated responsibility for contract performance management around primary care. Again, that went onto the register. I'm just looking at the number. It's a 1503, so it went on in 2015, and that would have been around the time that we took over delegated responsibility for primary care. And the issue at the time would have been that we'd not done this before. We were not sort of experienced in managing primary care contracts. That had been NHS England's remit previously, and the question was, if we take over this delegated responsibility and don't do it very well, that could sour our relationships with primary care, and that's absolutely something as a CCG that we wouldn't want to happen, kind of thing. So we put it on the register at the time, and again, it's stayed there ever since. It's not rated as a high risk. I think it's graded as 8 at the moment, and I think our experience over the 5 years since it's gone on the risk register is that we've done a pretty good job, generally speaking, in managing primary care contracts, and we've had a number of audits that have happened to us that have confirmed that's the case. So, you know, my view on that one is that it's probably worth leaving it on the risk register because it's the core of what we do as a committee, but I certainly don't think that there's any particular reason to look to upgrade that. Others might have a view indeed of whether a score of 8 is too high and we might want to reduce it. So I suppose I'll pause at that point and just see if anybody else, you know, in response to your prompt, Chris, to really maybe think a bit more than we sometimes do about the scoring of these risks. Do people think that we've got it about right in terms of that particular risk?
Okay, over to you, everybody. Nigel, any thoughts? Alicia.
It's just a question really, whether the integrated commissioning review that's happening across the system and also the ICS work has any bearing on this, and actually, given the uncertainty and the changes that may be afoot, whether they're acknowledged within this and whether that might impact.
Good point. Anybody want to take that? Chris.
So just to respond, I can't see how that would have an impact really in terms of workforce. It may do in the future, but currently I don't think it would have a significant impact.
Sorry, it was on the contracts, not the
on the contracts. Right, I was thinking on the workforce numbers particularly. Right, okay. Apologies.
Yeah, no, I've got another query about workforce, but I didn't know whether that'd be worth waiting until after Julie's section.
So I think in terms of the risk around the delegated responsibility, I think that it is a bit unclear about what the journey is going to be for primary care at the minute, because the conversations and the discussions around that integrated care and the ICS development is still quite early, and we are still awaiting some national guidance following the engagement of the document that was produced. So I think at this point, my view would be that it's probably not a good idea at this moment to revise that risk until we see a bit more of what comes out of some of those discussions and what the future sort of path looks like over the next few months. So I think in terms of this, I think it probably reflects where we are, but for slightly different reasons than actually delegation.
Okay. Anybody want to object to that? Add to it? Agree with it? Let's go with it. Let's stay with it.
Yeah, I'd agree in terms of we need
No,
more
I
detail
agree
from
with
the
Julie's
consultation.
suggestion.
Yeah.
Nick, say that again.
I was saying I agree. I think we need to wait for some of the information to come back from the engagement events and see what the detail is, and then we can interpret it for the risk.
Nigel.
Yeah, I'm happy to leave it as it is. I think I'm slightly bemused by this because management is supposed to assess the risk and then bring it to us to justify it to us. The ask is the committee decides the risk. Well, that's not the way it works. So I'm slightly nervous. I'm happy that Julie assesses it as a medium, which is what it is, if that's what she believes, and she's explained why. So I'm more than content with that. I just think we need to make sure the process is going in the right direction and not flip it on its head. So that's my only comment.
Yeah, good point, Nigel. And Richard's nodding his head for sure there.
Yeah, I think that's correct, isn't it? And yeah, the papers come with the score as it is, and I suppose that's the officer's recommendation, if you like, that's what the score should be. I guess what we're doing is just giving. There are people sitting around this table who, certainly in relation to me, know more than I do about the risks, and so if anybody felt we got it wrong for whatever reason, then obviously I would want to give them the opportunity to say so. That's all it is, really, Nigel. But I think from my own personal point of view, I would feel that it is, right to leave it on, and it's probably scored at the right level. So. And
don't misunderstand me. It's right that it comes to the committee for challenge.
Yeah. Yeah.
But we should be challenging what management are telling us.
Yeah.
And therefore, it's for Julie to explain why she thinks it is what it is, which she's done quite eloquently. So I'm happy with that.
Okay. Everybody happy at this moment in time? Yes? Sure? Okay.
Marvellous. So shall I move on, Chris? Have we covered off the risk register? Other than the discussion that's coming up about the workforce one, have we covered it off to your satisfaction? Because I know you said you wanted to spend a bit of time on it today. Have we done what you wanted to do?
Alicia, did you want to come back in again?
I'm just querying about the workforce because I've got a couple of questions on workforce, but I'm happy to wait till Julie's paper and I can see it's down below. So.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, to come back to the question. To me, Richard, yeah, I'm happy and content at this moment in time, but I don't want us to lose sight of the fact of this important area of our business. I really don't.
Yeah.
As you say, this particular, things come on, and I don't say we are flippant about them. Far from it, because every single committee reviews the risk register. But if the risks aren't right, then we've got to do something about it. Okay. So I'm happy to move on if everybody else is, and let Julie take us through the force paper.
Just before we move on to Julie, Chris, there was just a minor change to the terms of reference, which would it make sense to clear that piece of business up now, and then the floor is Julie's. So. On the terms of reference, you might remember I brought them to the last meeting. I'd had a look at them myself and thought that they were fit for purpose. But Julie quite rightly picked up that there's been some changes to the sort of subgroup arrangements beneath this committee, if you like, which we felt were worth reflecting in the terms of reference. So the changes that we're proposing, therefore, are at paragraph 18 in the terms of reference. Which are included in the papers. I won't read through all of them, but essentially it's replaced references to the primary care development work stream with references to the new sort of body, which is the primary care forum, which is the one that's going to be the sort of the engine room or the working group, if you like, that will do some of the legwork, which will then result in papers and proposals coming in here. So I really just wanted committee to approve those changes, and if they do, I'll take it on to governing body for final sign-off.
Okay, you've obviously read through those terms of reference. Everybody happy?
I'm sorry to do this, Richard.
What?
However, since we've written these papers and these have come out,
right.
There's been a slight change to the structure of these groups again, in that there has been a discussion about having a bit of a separation and a bit more of a strategic primary care group and a more operational group. So I think it's probably prudent, and I do apologise at the 11th hour that we're doing this, but I just think we probably need to reframe that wording. So with sincere apologies to committee, I think we need to go back and rephrase those groups.
That's absolutely fine by me, Julie. Don't know, just in terms of the timing of things, the governing body which needs to sign off any changes to these terms of reference will fall before the next meeting of the committee.
Yeah.
So I'm just wondering if committee would be happy to delegate to me and Julie, say, authority to draft whatever those further tweaks are, and then just take them straight to the governing body without coming back through the committee. Would that be acceptable to everyone?
Well, I'm happy to propose that. Julie, was just those tweaks, for want of a better description, does that come back to our conversation earlier in the week as to where this sits?
So there's going to be the primary care strategic group will be a subgroup of the primary care commissioning committee, and that's where most of the sort of, if you like, thinking and making sure we join up and join in and reflect the wider primary care. So this will need to join in with some of the neighbourhood work that's going on with partners, as well as looking at what the development of a primary care model is going to be in the future, taking into consideration some of the work that's coming through from the ICS and however that works its way through. So there'll be a group to do that sort of strategic thinking, and then underneath that group will be a more operational group that will take some of those thoughts and views and ideas and actually plan and work out and deliver those out into primary care and work with our other partners to try and get a much more inclusive community offer for our people, and that sort of reflects the PCN development as well as some of the other neighbourhood developments.
Okay, so how quickly can you and Richard get together on that then?
I think we could probably do that pretty quickly, Richard. I think it's just a few sentences and phraseology just to make that clear. Okay.
Is the committee happy for that to be delegated to Richard and Julie then? Are you happy, Nigel, on that?
In principle, I just wanted to ask a question though before I say yes or no.
Okay.
Am I to believe then that this strategic group, Julie, will in some way report to PCCC?
Yes.
So we'll get a quarterly or I don't know, bi-monthly or whatever, but there will be a reporting line.
Yes.
I think that probably needs to go in the terms of reference as well then.
Yes.
So I'm happy to delegate it, but if you can just formalise that for us, that'd be great.
Yeah.
Okay, I did query the situation a bit earlier, Nigel, earlier in the week, because I was certainly unsure about it. So we've got to a point of where hopefully we're all agreeing on that. Roxana.
Yeah, just picking up on Nigel's point around governance, really. I think we just need to be clear in the governance structure and in the terms of reference for PCC, how each of the groups will report, because my understanding is the operational group will operationalise once approved at PCC. So something would need to be approved first before the operational group would then take the work forward. So I think that just needs to be clear in the terms of reference.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sure you picked that up, Richard. Nick, any comments on that little side discussion there?
No, nothing from me.
Okay. All right. Okay, let's move on then to the fourth part or the third part of the Julie Frampton show.
Thank you, Chair. So as we've already sort of started the discussion, I won't go over the bits that Richard has already described about the origins of this risk. but I think there are some pertinent bits that have happened over the intervening years and more recently that can help sort of mitigate against some of these risks. So the paper itself talks about some of the staffing and the recruitment we've had through the additional roles scheme, and that will provide some additional workforce for the next 3 years as well. And we'll need to make sure that we keep abreast of what's going on in those recruitment plans and make sure that we recruit as well as we can and support the PCN through the Healthcare Federation to do that. So I think there are some other things that have sort of happened that it might be good to refresh the members of the committee over. We have the long-term plan now, which is quite clear about how the deliverables are going to be over the next few years, and the DARES supports that, particularly through the additional roles, as I've already described. I think the other thing to note is that our practices every year sign up to deliver the PDA, and majority of the practices deliver that as planned. And we do know those practices that sometimes have a little bit of difficulty, so we do put in some additional support to make sure that they can do that through the primary care team, and that the staffing in practice is there to deliver that. That in turn helps improve the healthcare and the quality of the healthcare for our patients as well. So also in here we've got things like the home visiting service, which is more of a COVID home visiting service at the moment. So again, that supports primary care in that the GPs can ask for the patients to be seen at home by an alternative group of staff, so that those patients get timely care, and hopefully we can keep as many of those patients at home as possible rather than convey to hospital. So there is that in place. The additional roles also helps sort of broaden out the amount of, or the different type of roles that can support a GP. So in there are wellbeing coaches, care coordinators that can all take on and do pieces of work for GPs and under the sort of guidance of GPs. Next year we will have some mental health practitioners that can add and support, and paramedics, they are in that plan. And I think that will help sort of spread some of the work out across to relieve some of the burden for our GPs. So I think there's lots of ways that we've put additional support in to help that. I think the other thing is, because we can do things like the home visiting service and My Best Life, for instance, contract, we've got quite a lot of ways to help our people, that mean that they don't have to look for services outside of Barnsley, and we can keep people close to their homes and to get sort of the care they need. So I think, given that we have quite a lot of these things in place, there are quite a lot of workforce roles to come over the next few years. I think that we are getting to be a lot more stable around our workforce, and I think the integrated teamwork through the neighbourhoods is becoming more aligned and coming on stream, so that also supports. I think the pandemic has helped and also has not helped in some of this as well, so there is a balance. On the whole, I think that the consequences probably would still remain at a 4, but some of the likelihood against the risk description is probably a 3, but that is obviously where the discussion will come as to a view of committee. Thanks. Is there anything else I can help with?
Julie, you've talked overall about beefing up, bulking up our teams, but you've not told us or indicated any sort of numbers at all.
Right. So the plan for this year in terms of the additional roles. So currently we have 77 whole-time equivalents coming into Barnsley this year through the additional roles. There is a plan to bring more staff in next year, and I think at the minute we're looking at probably an additional 30 roles next year. I think one of the groups of staff that I haven't mentioned is the clinical pharmacists. So we've got quite a number of clinical pharmacists within the CCG that are supporting work in practice and also supporting the PCN with some of the work that needs to be done. So there's a cohort of staff there that is included. The plans beyond sort of 21, 22 are a little bit more less set in terms of the additional roles, because there is also opportunities for further roles to be included in that scheme. So for this year, we are looking to recruit some I think about 4 nursing associates and 2 trainee nursing associates. So hopefully they will come in and be in place, and then we'll stay in Barnsley to work as well. So I think we are looking for an increase of around, I think at the end of this year, I think it was about 100, and I can't remember the exact number now, whole-time equivalents, given that there's been some slippage because of the pandemic.
Okay, so what we're talking about really overall is a recruitment campaign. So the recruitment campaign is kicked off. So how successful have we been up to now? You know, where are we with regards to the actual recruitment program? Are we on stream? Are we almost there? Are we halfway there?
So this year we've got probably 3/4 of the staff that the Federation were hoping to bring in to support the PCN. However, there is some underspend in that budget, and we've been trying to encourage Barnsley Healthcare Federation to look at other roles or more recruitment. There has been things like physicians associates exams were cancelled because of the pandemic, so that's impacted on being able to recruit, but we are hopeful to get majority of those that we were planning for this year in post by the end of March.
Okay, I'm not quite sure who put their hand up first, but I'll take Roxana first.
Thanks, Chris. I just wanted to flag, so Julie's just mentioned the risk around the underspend in relation to additional roles. So we are waiting some further guidance from NHS England around, because at the moment the CCG's forecast position assumes that we will utilise the whole of that resource in this financial year. It's highly unlikely we'll need to access the 40% funding that's sat with NHS England. So I have just asked NHS England for some clarity around expectations around the forecast position, any flexibility, particularly when we're considering the vaccination programme around that resource. We're trying to maximise the use of that, because what we don't want to do is essentially lose that earmarked Barnsley 40%. Because that once it's gone, it's lost to the Barnsley system. So we're trying to do whatever we possibly can to maximise that, but there is a possibility that funding will go at the end at 31st of March. It'll be there in next year, obviously, in terms of as we plan for the roles, but for the funding this year, it won't be there. So the committee just needs to note that, really, because it is a risk.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to bring in Mark Smith, then Nigel, then Marcia. So, Mark.
Yeah, I think that the roles that have been recruited, I'll go back to it. It is true that the clinical pharmacists that were already appointed and things like iHeart have been, and the home visiting service have been useful in supporting primary care. I think the things that have been recruited in the additional roles so far are probably the roles that are useful, perhaps in supporting the extra work that came part of the care homes work. I think the recruiting difficulties are probably going to come in the areas that might be more useful in supporting the primary care work that had already existed. So I think first contact physios, there were going to be problems with recruiting. So if you like, it's almost standstill. The extra roles that have been recruited are those to support the extra work that came along. So although there's the possibility that that this may provide extra support, I think the risk is still with the recruitment of things that would the problems with recruitment are going to come in the more useful roles, if you like, for existing work.
Okay, well, when this was first proposed, I, like you, had doubts as to whether we would be able to recruit, but the Federation were quite bullish about the fact that, you know, they were well on with it and they probably could recruit. So let's just hold what you've said, Mark, and let's at some stage come back to you if necessary. Nigel.
I mean, the paper's in some ways quite good. I think the thing that's missing for me is how many of each of those categories have we employed. And to say we're going to employ 77, you could say we're going to employ 77,000, but what have we actually done? And I think that's the deficiency. And I think I actually asked, is it James Barker? I can't think of his name. When he did his presentation, if after a quarter we could have an update on how many of each they had recruited. And that's what I was expecting today. Admittedly, it was James I asked, not you, Julie. But that's what we need, and we need to have that on a consistent basis.
You're right, Nigel.
Just every couple of months, because 77, you know, it could make up any number you want.
Yeah. Well, again, initially, I found the figures quite staggering. So, Alicia, before I bring you in, let's bounce this back to Julie then. And Julie, I appreciate you are not doing the recruiting, but Nigel is, you know, shares a very valid point with myself, really, and you've already heard what Mark said.
Yeah, so I think we started out with quite an aspirational recruitment plan prior to the sort of pandemic coming in, and that has impacted on the recruitment, so that there is an element of under recruitment for various reasons. I think Mark is probably correct in that quite a lot of these roles that have come on have come in and to support some of the specifications within the DES rather than specific general practice. However, some of the roles like advanced nurse practitioners or whatever were excluded from the additional roles, so they wouldn't have you know, and arguably they might have offered an additional more supportive element into practice, but they're not included in that scheme. The clinical pharmacists have picked up quite a bit, and again, they were existing, so I take that point. I think it's been quite hard to track down the actual recruitment figures. Ruth and I do express that and work it out, and sometimes it's easier to do that than others, but we are assured that there are I think it's the physicians associates that aren't quite at the aspiration that they wanted to be. The social prescribing link workers are all in post. The first contact physiotherapists, I believe the discussions with Swift are at a point where those will come into play fairly soon. I guess the other roles coming on next year, like the mental health practitioners and the paramedics, there's been sort of very recent changes to how that is going to sort of happen, particularly around the mental health practitioners. But there is still staff to be recruited at that point, and I think it is difficult to be really clear about the actual recruitment process at this moment in time.
Okay, so how are we going to make the decision then, based on that? Roxana, come back in.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to what Julie said. I think we just need to work with our partners probably a bit more closely in terms of some of these additional roles, because Swift, for example, you know, they employ mental health practitioners, and they may struggle, they may not, but I think it's about working with the partners. It's the same with the paramedics, and I think there's some emails that have just started kind of doing rounds this week about working with Yaz on a paramedic model. So it's using the kind of the touch points we've got out there to get some of this. So it's not actually the PCN recruiting, it's people that are well established, and the PCN working with those organisations to employ the staff. So I think it's just about working in a different way, and it comes back to, doesn't it, integration and partners working much more closely together in the future, because that's what all this is about. It's about the providers working together to deliver the right model. So I think there's probably some work to do from my perspective in terms of the plan from the PCN. So what's the plan from the PCN, and what will all these additional roles add to primary care? And I think that's probably something we need to ask James Barker for. And then I think there's something about how we then work with partners to ensure that that workforce is in place.
And I think just to add to that, I think it is quite difficult at the minute to have those discussions with some of our clinical directors, because they're quite fixed on how they want to do things, and they're quite fixed on where they want to go for these members of staff, rather than looking at some of our partners. So that has made it a little bit tricky. So I do appreciate that James has a bit of a job at times to sort of look at this and support decision making across there, and to work with the wider view on a place basis. But it's not insurmountable, but I think it's just something to be mindful of. I think we're certainly seeing some results coming in from the social prescribing link workers and how they're linking in with the children and young people. So we're getting some work and some good referral rates with that, which supplements our social prescribing My Best Life work as well. So there are some benefits in there, but I think it's quite hard to tease them out just at the minute, given that the Federation are working very hard on supporting the vaccination rollout. And I'm not trying to use that as an excuse, but the reality is that's the priority, and that's where quite a lot of the thinking and the work and the absolute hard work is happening.
All right, Julie. When is our next meeting?
It's the end of March, Chris.
Okay. We'll be in a better position, a more clear position to actually get the insurance that we need on this one, or what?
I think it's going to be quite hard to be 100% sure, but I think that now we're starting to get a lot of, well, not a lot, but we're starting to get different methods of delivery and different cohorts of people being able to support some of the work with the vaccination hubs and bits and pieces. Hopefully there will be a bit more room to be able to get those discussions in. It's certainly something that I want to try and work with James about a bit more closely, given that we've got questions remaining for this year, but we also need to start thinking about the additional roles and what that means in terms of the contract and the network DES for next year. So I think it's at a point where I think we're going to have to start to be quite hard. we need to move on with it, shall I say?
Alicia, you've been very, very patient. I mean, and then Mark Smith wants to come back in.
Okay, thanks, Chris. Yeah, there's a couple of things really. I think for one of for me, one of the things missing around this is a retention. So you're talking about recruitment, and I think if you're thinking about the impact of COVID, and we know that the impact of COVID on the NHS workforce broadly, so I think it's the absence of COVID and the absence of a retention policy in here, because if you're thinking about recruiting staff, they need to be supported by a stable workforce as well. So I kind of, it's just missing for me in there. I mean, you talk about the people plan, which it mentions interim. Actually, it was the people plan was published last July. So just thinking as well about the implementation of that, because there's quite a big ask of employers within the people plan as well. So just thinking about primary care and how are they responding to that people plan, because actually I think that'll have a big impact in terms of the expectations of employees. But for me, I just think we can't underestimate the impact of COVID, both on recruitment and on retention.
Okay, important word there, Alicia, retention. And time again, over these many months, we've all of us, in one way or another, talked about looking after our staff, keeping in touch with our staff. And there is a lot of work going on in the background that people don't realise what's happening, both in the CCG and in the council, and in our hospitals. But yes, having had a recruitment business, it costs you twice as much or 3 times as much to recruit than it does to actually retain people. And I don't care what sort of a business you've got, if you haven't got the right people with the right attitude and the right passion, they will not take your business forward. So thanks for bringing up the word, retention. Are you happy? Have you brought all the points you wanted to, Alicia?
Yes.
Okay. Mark, and then Nick. Jermaine wants to go in.
I think it's Mike, not me.
Mike. Oh, sorry, Mike.
The wrong MS.
I know.
I mean, the point I was going to raise is that the important thing is what it's like on the shop floor, and I think Mark has said he can't see much change at the moment. So I don't think we can change the risk if there isn't going to be any significant change on the shop floor.
Right. Keep going, Mike.
So what I would suggest is we have to get the feedback from the Federation and people about how how quickly they're getting people into posts.
Yeah.
And also see how that's affecting the workload of the GPs.
Yeah. Well, I'll say again, James Mark was very, very bullish about, he felt he could do what he wanted to do. So this definitely needs to come back here. Nick, do you want to come in?
I was only going to, around the point Alicia made about sort of retention around the additional roles as well. I think the ICS recognised there's some work to do that people aren't going to hit the ground running in the roles. There might be something around continued development, and obviously that cuts across all the CCGs having the same sort of issues around the recruitment and retention of the roles. So I know that the ICS have put forward that's something that needs looking at, but we have sort of that pipeline and that support for people. The roles that just aren't there in themselves, they need that framework of support as well.
Okay. Right. So where are we, Julie? Where are we now? How do we move on? What's the next bit?
Well, I think we just leave. I think we just sort of leave the risk as it is, and do some sort of more information gathering and just further work to come back and assure the committee where we are with various different bits and pieces. I think there's been some very valid points that have been raised that we need to think about. I think Roxana's point about making sure that we look at this across the providers and make sure that we get some experienced workforce coming in. And I think, Alicia, you're quite right, retention needs to be reviewed in this as well, because I think it's not just primary care staff. I think it's wider than just primary care staff.
Yeah, it's absolutely vital, you know, that retention and dare I say cuddle people. And we can't cuddle people, can we, at the moment? But if you don't cuddle this, you know, they don't feel wanted. So it really is a vital element in it's one hell of a responsibility to employ people, and I was reminded of that a long time ago as a young manager. It's one hell of a responsibility to employ people, and once you've employed them, you've got to look after them. You know, you've got to motivate them. You've got to do what's right by them, and they in turn will deliver back to you and your business what you're expecting. Alicia, I think, Madhuri, do you want to come in?
Yeah, so basically I was just sort of saying what everybody said. We have seen a lot of people being recruited into the practices, Chris, and there's some good work that is happening, but I think it's early days, because I think a lot of them who's come in, they got engulfed into the extra work that came with the pandemic. So I think it's not reflective at this moment in time. But certainly, I think there has been a movement in the form of recruitments that's happened in the primary care for good work. But I think it is early days, because how much of it is going to just offset and sort of make it better? I don't know. I think at the moment it's just engulfing in the work that's extra.
Okay. Alicia.
Yeah, just picking up on what you said, Chris, about looking after people, and I think the published NHS People Plan last year is a really good framework, and it talks about leadership, it talks about culture, it talks about recruitment and retention, it talks about health and wellbeing and flexible working for staff. It very much is about supporting the workforce. So I'd be really interested to see how primary care are addressing the key elements of the NHS People Plan. Maybe that framework might help give you that assurance that the committee needs.
Yeah, thank you for that. Nick.
Just really quickly, I think on the ICS primary care strategy made reference to the people plan, and that we need to look at a primary care people plan for South Yorkshire Bassett. So it's in the strategy that was recently refreshed.
Okay. Well, we've had and quite rightly so, a really good and thorough dig into this paper, Julie. I hope you believe that the committee have helped in all sorts of ways for you to move this along. But I'll bring that Millington phrase back, all about pace, and just reminding Roxana that there are monies available, and we don't particularly want to lose those monies if at all possible, albeit some may be falling into next year, but we need to get on with it. That's where I'm coming from, and I'm sure you will do so. So is everybody happy and content that we have given this paper its due consideration? Yeah. Okay. All right. Let's look at then, before we move on to other things, item 11, conduct of the meeting. Were you happy with the papers that you got? Did you get them in good time? Yeah. We did have to reissue them. That was just a glitch. Any areas for additional assurance other than what we've already talked about, where we're going to be bringing things back here, hopefully at pace? Any further training needs? No. Okay. Richard, or were there any questions from the public?
No, Chris, we've not received any.
Okay. Right. What items do we need to escalate the governing body then? Come on, Nigel, you're pretty good at this.
I wouldn't have thought any of them, to be perfectly honest.
Okay.
Because the terms of reference we haven't approved.
No.
We've delegated, but they'll be going to the governing body anyway.
No.
We aren't changing that last risk on employment. Whether you want to mention the other risk going from whatever it's going from to, I don't know, but I wouldn't have said any of it was particularly burning for the.
Okay, right. Alicia, bearing in mind that you're here as head of public health, what you've heard this afternoon, have you had assurance that we're actually getting on with it and looking after the people of Barnsley?
Yeah, yes, definitely. Yeah, been very interesting. Very good to see the controls in place.
Okay. Nick, at one time I would say give us some gems, but we're so, we're almost blinkered on that horrible C19 word, but you have the benefit of seeing other CCGs and attending these sorts of meetings. So any comments you'd like to make as to whether we could be better, apart from sacking the chair?
I wouldn't know. I think it's probably the CCGs are grappling with the same issues as yourselves. Things around like the additional roles recruitment. Hence where the ICS has probably got a role where those are cross-cutting things. That it's something, putting those supports in or putting those flexibilities in about how we can use those sort of monies. So I don't think Barnsley is an outlier in terms of the issues that you're facing and similar ways of approaching it.
Okay, thank you. Is the final word going to go to Roxana then?
Chris, I just wondered whether we could just flag to the governing body that the committee have considered the risk around delays in recruitment for the additional roles, because that will probably fit in with the report on the financial position I take in March,
okay.
Which probably include the underspend against the additional roles. So it's just so that the governing body is cited on the fact that this committee is aware of that issue.
Well done, Roxana. I knew I could rely on you. Well, that brings our agenda to an end. The date of our next meeting will be Thursday, the 25th of March, 2021 at 2:30. And I'd like to close this part of the meeting. Thank you for everyone taking part. Lots of good things come out. Lots of things still to do. So we need to close this one down and then come back. Is that right, Richard? Yep.